This year was going to be my first year going to costume college. I've wanted to go ever since I first heard about it, like 8 years or something, but I never really made it a priority. This year I had a little extra money, and so I was finally going to go. But, 2020 happened, so it's been postponed till next year. However, when they decided that it wasn't going to happen this year, they pushed back all the themes for next year. One of the events that they always have is a Thursday night pool party with a different theme of some sort. This year's theme was going to be historical swimming costumes. I've always wanted to make a historical bathing costume, so I thought this would be the perfect chance. I'm actually pretty alright with costume college being cancelled this year because now I have even more time to work on my costumes and I won't just have to wear my 1850s costume, which I'm pretty tired of and is really hard to travel with. I'll have a whole nother year to make a whole bunch of new awesome costumes. I also will know how sign-ups work, so maybe I'll have a chance of actually staying in the hotel that it's hosted at and not one a couple blocks away like I was going to have to. The only downside is that the money I had for it, I put into my studio, so now I'm going to have to save up for it again. To make up for Costume College not happening in person this year, the Costume Guild West, the group that puts on Costume College, has decided to host some online events, one of which includes a historical swimming bathing costume sew-along. I've decided to join this one. Lucky for me, this coincides well with finishing the construction on our new house. Although, my dad and I are starting to work on my sewing studio this week. But I do have a little bit more time to work on sewing. I just have to do it in our new house. This sew-along is taking place on Zoom. We're meeting on 5 different Sundays this summer. Diane, the woman who's hosting it, has given us a timeline of when we should have what parts of our bathing costume done. We're allowed to choose a costume, whatever one we want, from 1800 to 1940, whatever style era we want. She also sent us some patterns and inspiration to help us get started. I figured since we have a big time range that we could choose to sew this project from, I thought might as well make one that ties in with the big project I'm going to be working on this fall, which is sewing a costume based on the character of Billy from the Motor Maid series, which came out between 1911 and 1914. In the second book, The Motor Maids by Palm and Pine, Billy and Nancy go swimming, and Billy saves a couple people from drowning, no big deal. But I figured since she goes swimming in it, I might as well make my swimming costume in the Edwardian period. It doesn't talk at all about what her bathing costume was like, so I'm just going to make one that appeals to me. I've decided to keep things simple and just use a sewing pattern. I've chosen this Folkwear Pattern number 253, local area code. It's a vintage bathing costume with a sailor collar. It's a lot of fun. It's got a skirt and bloomers. I'm just going to keep it simple and follow this pattern, though the sleeves are rather puffy and that kind of reads more 1890s to me than 19 teens, so I'm going to change them. I have a couple sewing patterns that have just been riding around in the back of my car for whatever reason, so I'm either going to take the sleeve from this one or this one, just to have a shape. For my Edwardian clothing projects, I've been referencing the American System of Dressmaking, which was a correspondence course in the 19aughts and teens, all about dressmaking and clothing construction. It also has sections on different wardrobes to make for different occasions, including a trip to the seaside. And so it has a few different bathing costumes in it, including this one, which is the old time, but just as popular sailor blouse with collar and dicky. I think it's similar enough to the Folkwear pattern that I'm going to go ahead and use that, but with the smaller sleeves. When talking about what type of fabric to select, the American System for Dressmaking says, in deciding upon the color, select either a dark blue, dark brown, or black, preferably the former. Such shades as red, light tan, or white are permissible for little girls. Keep the foundation dark and introduce colors in the trimming if desired. Knickerbockers are worn under the suit. Lightweight serge, mohair, brilliantine, and flannel are the fabrics most commonly employed for these garments, but black silk or satins are also used. Of course I want to make mine out of wool, but a lot of things are out of stock in this quarantine, so I haven't been able to find an affordable, lightweight wool in navy. And so I've settled on the next alternative, just blue cotton flannel. It's cheap, it's affordable, it'll do the trick. I'm not sure yet what I'm going to do for my trim, but probably, as it says, I will introduce some color in the trim. There's about a dozen of us in this sew-along, and about half of us are using this Folkwear pattern. Several of the others were talking about making it so that the skirt fastens up the front instead of in the back to make it easier to go to the bathroom. I don't really know how that will help. The skirt's detachable. You gotta take basically the whole thing off anyway since it's a jumpsuit to go to the bathroom. Plus I'm only gonna be wearing it for a couple hours at a time, so just plan accordingly. I don't think it'll be an issue. So I'm gonna keep with the skirt closing in the back. Several others were also talking about making the skirt attached to the jumpsuit body, but I'm gonna make it detachable so then I can take it off to go swimming if I feel like it. Most of the other women in the group are not planning on going swimming in their outfits, but how can you resist? Of course I'm gonna go swimming in this bathing costume. I hate swimming in the Puget Sound, but we'll see, maybe I will for this costume. But if there's a pool, I'd totally go swimming in it. Several others were also worried about using a flannel or a wool because they're worried about being too hot, but they all live in Southern California. I live in Washington State. It doesn't get that warm here, but really the flannel will hopefully keep me warmer if I do go swimming in our cold waters. I'm also planning on making a pair of bathing boots to go with this costume as well as the cap. In our first meeting on Sunday, we talked quite a bit about what women wore underneath their bathing costumes, if they wore anything, or how you dealt with like sticky fabric. Women usually wore corsets under these costumes, which just blows people's minds today. The American system of dressmaking references that most women wore a corset and they often wore an old one. Or if you didn't have one, you could rent one at the beach. I don't have an old Edwardian costume and I would be pretty hard pressed to find a beach where I could rent one. So I'm not making one right now because I don't have time to complete the bathing costume and a corset before the sew-along's over. But I'll probably come back and make one later because I do really want to try swimming in one and see what that's like. Who knows, maybe this will just be like version 1 and I'll make a wool version another year. So now I've got my pattern all cut out. I put it on freezer paper because I can't stand tissue paper patterns. And it's time to go cut out my mock-up. I finished my mock-up, so let me show you. I'm gonna add a little length to it. I'm gonna add like an inch to the bodice. My waist is down here. I'm not gonna spend too much time making sure that this is like level on how my body actually is because it's a bathing costume, it's not like a tailored garment. I got 2 sleeve mock-ups here. This is that 80s pattern. I didn't do a very good job setting this puff in right. And then I have the more 70s pattern. I'm gonna go with this one. I think the extra inch in the bodice will help give more lift in the body. This one has loads of movement, but I'm not too sold on that puff. Need to add some length in the legs as well. I'll just add in 4 inches maybe because they want you to hem a good bit and I want it to come a good bit lower than that. But that's how everything goes for me. So now it's time to cut out it in the actual fabric and put it together. I pre-washed this fabric and I'm really glad I did because look how much it shrunk. I also ironed it, but my iron's crap. I think I should give it another shot though, and then I'm going to cut out the fabric. On the bloomer patterns, I've just written +4 to remind myself to add +4 inches. I'm going to have to measure the skirt pattern piece and see how it is compared to this because I did not do a mock-up of the skirt, but I'm going to assume that I'm adding 4 inches for now. Patterns, when they want you to add, they usually tell you where they want you to add or shorten. So they want it at the bottom of the bloomers, but for the bodice they want it along this line. So I just cut along this line and I am adding in an inch using this painter's tape because it's what I have on hand. Patterns often come with a cutting diagram like this telling you how to lay out your pieces depending on what size fabric you have. Should I follow it or not? I have a little bit more fabric than what they said, but I'm going to have a little bit less if I also make the hat out of this. Plus my sleeves are a different size. But I've added inches to all this, so like I added 4 inches to this, so I would run into these now. So maybe I'll just go ahead and do it however I feel like. Because I feel like these are often not quite perfect in the real world. My fabric has shrunk so much that these don't fit. Alright, let's just throw all caution to the wind and use a rotary cutter like I never do. Cut them out however I feel like on the fabric because it shrunk so much that they don't fit according to the diagram. Don't even have pattern weights. So I cut this pattern piece out and I was like, ooh, if I fit it like this on the fold, it'll fit way better. This is the sailor collar. Not making a medieval hood. Cut it on the wrong side on the fold, so now I have to cut this one out twice. Again. Luckily I only cut it out once so far. Alright, I got all the pieces cut out. It took forever, aka like an hour and a half. I had enough fabric. I've got a little bit less than 2 yards left. I cut most of my small pieces out of my scraps. So I haven't cut out the cap yet, but I should have plenty for that. Now it's time to sew it together. First I'm gonna have some tea, and then get going. Just pulled out my machine and realized I only have white thread or bright blue thread, which will really stand out against my navy blue fabric. So looks like I'm gonna have to go hope that the store in town's open, put on my mask, and maybe I'll whip up a mask real quick because I keep losing all of mine. That'll be a good use of time while I drink my tea, and then go get some thread. So I went to find my elastic to make a new mask, and what did I find? Black thread. It'll work, good enough. I'll get different thread for the top stitching and the I have top stitching right away though. Can I get away not top stitching that right away? Life in a pandemic. It's a challenge. Well, I'll start with the black thread, see how I feel. Sewing up the bodice here. It's supposed to be top stitched along here, but since I only have black thread and I would prefer it to be in blue, but I don't want to go out today until I have to, I'm gonna just baste here and then I can rip it out later and sew it in by hand or machine. So I gotta sew that down, baste all these so that stay stitch them so that they don't stretch while I'm working. Put the pleats in, put the side seams together, put the pleats in, and then make the bloomers. Kind of feel like a Girl Scout, like a cadet, and I should have some badges on my nice vest. I was a Girl Scout for 13 years, I got some badges. I did not mark where the pleats were when I was cutting out the fabric because I was planning on using my little tracing wheel. So this is a paper with some wax or marker thing of some sort on it, and so I just line it up on here, take my little tracing wheel, and make the marks of where the pleats are supposed to go. This is actually the first time I've used one of these on this project. And wow, that didn't work at all. Bit better. You can also use this side, I think, to scratch it on. That worked better. The instructions say for the pleats to fall towards center front and towards center back, but you know what? I like it when they fall away from center front more, so that's what I'm gonna do because it's my swimsuit. I got all the pleats into the bloomers, and this fabric doesn't have a right or wrong side, but now that these pleats are in here and I want them to match the top, there is a right and a wrong side, so I figured out which one is which, and I put a pin on the right side so I can keep track of it while I sew them together. I've got my 2 legs sewn up. The seam wasn't going so hot, and then I realized I had my bobbin in upside down, rookie mistake. Now I'm going to press these open, and then I'm going to put one inside the other and sew them together to become a pair of bloomers. Hey, one leg right side out goes inside a leg that is inside out. Match seams square, right sides together, stitch. Crotch seam from back to front, stopping and back stitching at the square. Press open above notches. I don't know where the square is, so I'm gonna have to look that up. Is this the back? On this seam, you're supposed to stitch from the back up to the square. The square is on the front here. This is gonna be where you button into the outfit. Right here, I'll put a pin there to mark where I'm stopping, and I'll just take these ones out so I know that I'm not sewing there. Now I can pull this leg out, this leg out, and I have a pair of bloomers. Beautiful, eh? Now I need to attach these bloomers to the top, and then I'll probably stop for lunch. With this pattern, when you attach the two together, you're attaching them with wrong sides together, because the seam is going to be on the outside of the right side when you're done, because it's going to have a waistband that goes over it. So it feels a little backwards, but it's not. Got to the point where I was almost before. The length feels a lot better. While I was eating lunch, I was reading through the instruction again coming up, and I realized a lot of top stitching coming up. So I went out, got the thread. When I worked on this the other day, I was getting a little frustrated because the waistband didn't match up. It was like 4 inches too short. And I double checked to make sure I'd cut out the right pattern size, and I had. So I don't know what's going on with that. Maybe my pleats wound up smaller than they're supposed to be. But it fits me well, so I don't know. The front facing also came out short. And I did add length to the bodice, but I added the same length to the front facing when I cut it out. So I'm not sure what happened there. I added it to the front placket too, so I don't know if that's going to wind up short. But I'm going to recut the front facing, put it on, and then the front placket goes on. We'll see if it's too short too. Got the front facing attached here. Now I gotta press it so that it just rolls over so that you don't see it from the front. One thing I really like about this pattern is it doesn't call for any fusible interfacing. I hate fusible interfacing, and it has no place in a historical garment, in my opinion. These instructions for the front placket are really confusing me, because it says fold placket in half lengthwise along fold line wrong side in, but in this drawing, gray means right side. And so I would say the right side is in on that, which wrong side in doesn't make any sense, because then you would have your fold over part on the wrong side. So I think I'm gonna do it right side in. I kept being really confused why my notches on my bodice front don't match the notches on the facing and the placket. So I pulled out the pattern, make sure I transferred it right. I lengthened it and the notch was below the lengthening line. The notch should be above the lengthening line because now my notch is way lower. So that's where the confusion comes from. If you lengthen or shorten your bodice, this notch is going to be in the wrong spot. Got the placket stitched on. Top stitching's a little wonky because I was top stitching on this side, so I couldn't see where I was on this line, but it's okay. I wasn't sure what was going on here, so I was just kind of ignoring this part. But the front facing goes over the placket, so I don't need to fix this stitching. No one's going to see it except for everyone who watches this video. Now I need to cover this up, sew a little box here, but I want to make sure that the waistline matches up. So I'm going to pin this into place where that is appropriate. Then it's time for the collar. I've got my collar sewn up. I'm surprised that I wasn't told to do some top stitching here because this pattern loves top stitching, but maybe I do it later, I don't know. It did say to put the trim on first, but I just ordered my trim the other day. I ordered some very thin red rickrack. So I'm going to add it on later. I might also get some thin red bias tape to put on, and I wanted to just see the finished garment before applying the trim. Then I can make sure it's straight if my garment winds up crooked at all. I'm not too worried about adding it later. I'll do it by hand. I clipped the collar. I did a stay stitch on the curve so it doesn't stretch as I sew it, and then I clipped the curve to help make it spread a little bit easier. Now I'm going to attach it to the bodice, and then I'll put the neck facing on, and then I finish this whole page of instructions and get to go on to the last page. When I pinned the neck facing on, it was a little bit too short on the right side. I mean, like the right side of the body, not the right side of the fabric. So I've narrowed this seam allowance, and then I will widen this, and I think I should be able to eke out enough. The last step on the collar is to edge stitch down this facing, which is folded inside, being careful not to catch the collar. But I just don't really see how I can do that neatly by machine, so I'm just going to go ahead and whip it down by hand. Most of it is covered by the collar, but I just feel like that would make me happier. Wish the collar was longer. It doesn't come very far in the back. Maybe I'll have to change that. My dad's hammering in the background, but I need to do this waistband for the skirt. It has this little button placket, so then you can button it to the waistband of the whole jumpsuit part, so then when you're wearing it, it doesn't slip down all the time. So I've got my piece in, I'm gonna iron it, fold it in half, and then stitch it down to the waistband and close it in it, flip it around. I did pleat the skirt already, but it feels kind of big, so I'm not sure if I did it the right size or not. So I'm gonna put together this waistband and then see if I need to add some more pleats to make it fit. I just put some pins where the buttons are gonna go. I don't think the top stitching makes that much of a difference. Like, I don't think it needs to be exactly on that line, so I just put pins to remind me where the buttons are gonna go, so I can do the little thing. Don't do what I just did and sew this down without actually reading the directions. I tend to look at the photos instead of reading the directions, but here it says make the buttonholes in the placket before doing that. So I thought they were just like marking where they went. Now I'm gonna just put them in by hand. I guess I was gonna do these ones by machine since no one's gonna see them, but now that they're on here, I gotta do them by hand, which is fine. It's good practice. Got those put in, a little wonky, but that's what I get for doing it after this. Now I'm gonna fold this up, sew it up, and see how it fits on my waistband. What is this skirt waistband lining? I don't have one of those. Skirt waistband, cut one. No notes about a lining. So it says O. Pattern piece O. Apparently I'm supposed to cut a lining out of it too. So I guess I'm gonna have to go do that so I can sew those together. But I was just cruising along, making stuff up, and I folded over the waistband over this. And then I was like, wait a minute, when I flip this out, that's not how it works at all. So I think what I'm actually gonna do is just start all over on this. I'm gonna cut two of this waistband so I can have a waistband and a waistband lining, and then I'm going to cut one of these so that I can put the buttonholes in properly, like make it neater. I'm just going to start this over. Be a lot quicker probably than unpicking this tiny stitch. Okay, buttonholes, take 2. Luckily I decided to just go ahead and force myself into making them on the machine with that last go around, because if I had done those by hand and then made all those mistakes, that would have been really annoying. I found 3 of these little cards of buttons when I was looking through my stuff the other day, so I've decided that I'm going to use them. I think that's enough buttons for this project. I hope so. I think it uses 11. I should probably double check, but I bought these, I don't know what for. I now have this sewn onto one. Looks a lot better. I got the holes. Got the holes so that the buttons can go through them. Put it on very nicely. Now I'm gonna get the other one, put it on top here, sew the edges together, flip it inside out, and they'll be ready to attach to the skirt. So I just held the waistband up to my skirt, and same deal as with the jumpsuit. It's like way too short. So am I just terrible at pleating and have not been taken out enough? Good chance. But I'm gonna need to do something about that. I've got the pleats in here. I put pins in each of the spots where the pleats are supposed to go, and then I brought them together. So I don't know if I was supposed to pleat it a different way that did more than that or what, but I guess I'm gonna have to take out some of these stitches and these narrow pleats. I have to take out some of these stitches and these narrower pleats, make them deeper. I also need to decide if I'm going to put a pocket in or not, because I forgot to put a pocket in when I was doing my side seams up. So if I do want to add one, I think now is the time, because I can just easily cut a slit into the side seam, sew the pocket in, and then I can have a supporting strap that ties into the waistband so it doesn't like sag and pull on the skirt too much. It'd probably be good to take that step. Put my hotel key, phone in it. Don't want to, but I will. However, putting the skirt on, the side seams are right here and right here. I feel like that's too far forward for a pocket, so I'm not gonna add a pocket. I took 2 pleats on each side out and made them deeper, so now it fits the pattern, the waistband. I'm gonna pin the waistband on and then sew it up. Top stitched this part of the skirt down, but there are like a million layers in this spot, especially down here where the pleats are overlap a bit more, so I'm just going to whip this part down by hand. So now that I've got that done, the next bit is to move on to the finishing step, step 7, which is actually not the last step. There's a step 8 of the bathing cap, but time for finishing. Make this inset, and then I don't know what I'm doing about the tie yet, because I think I want that to be contrasting color. Then we got some hemming to do and buttonholes. So I'm gonna try to get a bunch of this prepped to where I'm ready to do a bunch of handwork, so then I can do that tonight while watching a movie or something. With this center front inset, I am going to put the decorative trim on first, just because I think it'll be easier. I have my trim here. It's like some vintage rickrack cotton trim. I went ahead and pre-washed it because I pre-washed my flannel, and so I don't want this to shrink and that not to shrink, so I just like took it all off the spool, wrapped into a big sort of loop, and then gently tied that in a knot, and then threw it in the washer in the dryer, and then I ironed it and put it back on here. So I'm gonna put this on here. I'm just doing the rickrack. I'm not doing the straight because I didn't get any. I've pinned the rickrack on here, and I folded it in half to make sure that it's coming out at the same spot on the other side, and then meets in the middle. I'm gonna go ahead and sew this on by hand, because then I feel like I'll have a lot more control to keep these going parallel, and then I'll be able to tuck these ends in and do it a lot neater. I went ahead and hemmed the bottom of the bloomers. I got this elastic, I got a safety pin on it. I'm going to thread it through this hole around here and then attach the ends together. Check how it fits, and then tuck it in here and finish sewing that down. I've got the elastic in here. It seems like it fits pretty well, so I'll just go ahead and sew those down. Then I put the skirt on over it, because now I need to figure out what length I want to hem it. It feels a little bit long right now. I think I want it to be more like just hitting the knee. I guess I should look at some photographs for see what the proper length is. But that's what I think I'm gonna do. I could really wear this skirt outside of, like, just as a skirt in the come fall winter. It'd be kind of cozy, I think. We'll see how it looks with the rickrack on it. But maybe I didn't need to add all that length to the skirt because I'm gonna hem up a lot here. So I think I'll just, I don't know, it's hard to figure out what length to make a skirt when it's on yourself. So I'll just have to pin it and hope for the best. Do some measurements of the length. Working on putting in this like little, what is it called? Front inset. And it's said to match up with the shoulder seam, but that's choking me. So I think it needs to be lower down than that. So it attaches on one side, and then it attaches on the other side with hook and eye. So say this is like that. How high is it supposed to be? You know what, I don't really want to put this in. I don't really want to put it in right now. You can always add it in later, I suppose. I understand the modesty aspect of it, but it's just like choking me. If you're gonna have it high enough to be able to see the decorations, I'm using the little view thing as a mirror, then it's choking me. So, I mean, this I guess is an okay height. I'm gonna leave it off for now and add it on last if I want to. So the time has come to figure out where to put all the buttons. They are marked on the pattern, but since I added to the bodice length, I need to make my own button placements because they're quite far off. I'm gonna do the hem on the skirt by hand while I'm doing some Zoom calls tonight. I think it'll just look a little bit better by hand. I put some rickrack on the sleeves. I just put it over the hemline on the sleeves. For some reason it had me hem the sleeves before putting the sleeves in, which leaves a raw edge sticking out. So I need to tack that in. I don't like how that happened. You should always put the hem on the sleeves after you've sewn up this side seam on the sleeve. So I've got all my trim on and I have got my buttons on. I did all my buttonholes by hand because I like doing that. I did some seam finishing. I did a cat stitch to finish the seams on the inside, which was a stitch I learned from the American System of Dressmaking. And I think I'm pretty much done. Now it's just time to go wear it.
It's all the cats.
And so that's my experience with Folkwear 253, the vintage bathing costume. Overall, it was pretty fun to sew up. There were a few issues I had with the pattern. I really wish that they had different lines for the different sizes so that when you're cutting out the pattern, you can easily follow them. You know how some companies have different line styles, like a dashed line or like dot, dash, dash, dot for the different sizes, so you don't get confused. That would have been really handy for this pattern because the numbers marking which line was which were pretty dang sparse. There was a few pieces where there was no number on it at all, so you had to refer to a different pattern piece and then count the lines to figure out which one was the size that you were working on. There were a couple mistakes in the instructions, like that one I mentioned with the front-facing pattern marked the wrong way. This pattern has been out for over 20 years. I would have expected them to have fixed that by now. I'm not sure what was going on with the piece that I cut that was too short, even though I added an inch to go with the bodice. I don't know what happened there. I was thinking as I was editing though about how my waistbands kept being too short for how much fabric I had in the bodice and drawers with the skirt. And I thought that I just, pleated poorly and took out the wrong amount. But with the body, the bodice and the drawers both matched each other. So if I had pleated poorly, it's kind of weird that I pleated exactly the same on both. So I'm thinking maybe the pleats are marked just for one specific size. And if you're doing a different size, then you have to adjust your pleats to make it fit in the waistband. For example, there was something marked on the pattern, I forget what it was now, maybe like a buttonholes, and it said placement is for size 6. So maybe the pleats are just made for that size too, and if you are doing a larger size, then you have to adjust it. And then I wish the dart was marked differently. It was on the top of that adjustment line, like I had pointed out, where my darts weren't lining up because I had adjusted the size. But those are minor things. Overall, it was fairly easy to follow the instructions, apart from with this modesty piece. I didn't even tack it, I didn't even put it in how you're supposed to, I just pinned it in. You're supposed to do buttonholes and buttons. Everyone in the group that I sewed with, who made this pattern, had issues with this front-facing inset, or whatever it's called, this modesty panel thing. They all felt like it was too narrow to really fit in here and to be able to button and everything. I really wanted it to match up with those seams and fit in here. I think it's too narrow. I feel like I need to make one that's a little bit wider and then fits in. I don't know if that I would do the buttons and buttonhole, maybe just hook an eye. I also feel like it would choke me if it went much higher, especially if I was trying to swim. So I might remake this and cut it out a little bit more, make it a little bit wider so that it fits in and lines up nice with the trim. I didn't add the tie. I didn't want to have one that was permanently attached, so I was just going to tie one around because I'm sure I have one. I was a Sea Scout for years, so we wore dress blue uniforms. I'm sure I have a neckerchief tie somewhere, but I forgot all about it and didn't go find it yet. So maybe when I unpack this winter, I will find it. I also forgot to mention I really wish this collar was longer, like long enough to cover that seam on the back yoke. I really like the skirt. I'm totally gonna just wear it about this winter. I had a problem though. I had so many problems with the waistband, but even after all that, I had a problem with these buttonholes that you're supposed to put buttons on the side, on the waistband of the body so that your skirt can attach to it. So I guess if you go sewing with the skirt on, it doesn't drag off of you. However, I put the trim on after I sewed the skirt all together because I didn't have the trim yet. And when I sewed the trim on, I sewed close to that buttonhole, and so now I can't get any buttons in this buttonhole. So it happened with all of them, that one. So now I can't put buttons in here. If I was gonna do this again, I would put those buttons a lot higher up here because that even wouldn't fit a button in right. So I put the buttons higher up and do the trim first. But oh well. I mean, I'm probably gonna take the skirt off when I go swimming in it, so it doesn't matter much. The main issue I have with this bathing costume is the shape is not right. Foundation garments are key. Looking at me wearing this and just like, modern undergarments, it's not the look of the Edwardian era. I need to make a corset to go with this. I've been researching bathing corsets and thinking about it a lot, doing more research. So Edwardian corsets were often underbust corsets, and so in our group we're all like, we found an example of a Edwardian bathing corset, but it was an underbust, and we're like, we need some support besides just that. And so I researched a bunch about bathing brassieres, And I am going to make one of these, but it's almost August. No, it's almost September. So the bathing corset and brassiere is gonna go on my list of things to do, but after I finish my Edwardian motoring outfit. That has a deadline of the beginning of February, so I need to finish that before I can jump back into the bathing costume. Plus, I'll do it in the spring and then it'll be ready for costume college next year. Also, I'll have experience making an Edwardian corset. Maybe I'll use like my mock-up, make a good mock-up final for my bathing corset, and I'll have experience making brassieres. I did make the cap that goes with this pattern, and I will have a separate video for that because this one is already getting very long. So that will probably come out next week. Then I have a video on how I made these bathing boots, which will come out maybe in 2 weeks. Then I'm going to also have a video wrapping it all up, showing the whole ensemble together and trying out in the water. So subscribe by hitting the button down below. If you didn't know, if you hit subscribe, then there's this little bell that shows up. If you click it again, then you'll get notifications saying when I have a new video coming out. It'll have like little ding things next to it when you've done that. I didn't know that when I first started watching YouTube videos, so thought I would tell you in case you didn't. But in the meantime, leave me a comment, letting me know what you think about this kind of bathing costume. Not so good for getting a tan. I gotta get some stockings to wear with it before I go to costume college and wear it. But in the meantime, my leggings will do. Have a great week till I see you next.